Hey, Carla's waiting in your classroom to tell you that we're having stuff in here. Would you mind go telling her? It is. She didn't know if you knew, so she's waiting for you to tell you. Good evening. Our focus for the month is walking with each other in fellowship, and that fits in pretty well with with what's going on in Deuteronomy. Well, that's not my problem. So whenever we have the focus for the month, it's on fellowship. And we'll start here in just a minute. I'm not gonna try to talk over people. Howdy. All right, Deuteronomy chapter 3 through chapter 21. We're just finishing up what we did last week, or what we started last Sunday. And this next week, I'm not going to be here. So we'll have singing. That's why we switched it. And Sunday, we'll have guest speakers. I know. It's okay. You can come next week. And one of the themes that is, I think, maybe the most important idea that from putting things together is that the people that we walk with will affect our destiny. They affect our destination. Wherever we go, whoever we go with, that's really important idea. So we've been talking about that. We see how it worked out in the book of Judges and other places, which we haven't got yet, but we know how all of that has worked out as far as the Israelites going in and conquering nations and that kind of thing. So we're walking. The idea of this week has been walking with faithful companions, and the importance of that. That's why the last lesson on Sunday morning was on fellowship and the reasons that we have fellowship, what it does for us, that kind of thing. And then tonight I'm going to kind of continue on with that idea. The themes, though, we've already kind of got an overview of Deuteronomy 3 through 21. And we're just going to we had moved into the questions. I think we got into the first one. What instructions did Moses give regarding relationships with the Canaanite nations? And so let's look in the second question here in chapter 8. Moses warned the Israelites not to forget God in times of prosperity. So that's where we are. I want to start with that. And if you would, go ahead and let's have a prayer so we can get started. All right, let's pray. Father, thank you so much for your love, for the opportunities that we have together tonight to study from your word and discuss its meaning in our lives. Help us, Lord, to understand ourselves, understand you better. Help us to be a light in the community, and as we walk with each other, Lord, help us to build the camaraderie and the unity that we should have that is befitting your church. Lord, we pray that our attitudes will be healthy and strong, and that we will see your word and be strong in the sense of putting it into practice in our own lives. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Okay, so in chapter 8, Moses warns the Israelites not to forget God in times of prosperity. And that's interesting, because you would think that we would, as humans, we know who gives us the prosperity, and so we wouldn't walk away. But in times of prosperity, it's some of the easiest times to walk away from God. So how can one's choice of companions influence our ability to remain faithful to God in good times of life? How does that work? All right, true. So if we have Christian friendships and companionship, that's going to help us go and make sure we're going in the right direction, right? That's really important. Why is it any different or is there any difference when things are going well in life? Why is there any difference between having corrupt companionship in that time versus at other times where things are not going as well? Is there any real difference in the influence? Don't think so? He says no, and you say yes. So why do you say yes? Okay, so we have influence of ungodly people when things are going well in our lives. And we also have influence of ungodly people when things are not going so well in life. Is there any difference in those two situations? All right, how? True. So if things are going really bad, your ungodly friends may influence you to do things to try to cope with the situation you're in. What about it when things are going well? How is it that someone could be influencing us for evil when we're not trying to forget things anymore? We're enjoying life. Is there any danger there? Of course. You know, the first thing that came to mind when I thought about this question is that when I have money, things are going well, and I have money in my life, I have a whole lot more potential for problems than I do without it. Have you ever thought about that? Things go well financially. Now, I know life can go well in many ways, right? But if you get money, you have friends who are all of a sudden going to, oh, you need to spend your money on this and this and this, right? Or maybe it's because of the influence around us. We just see all these things that we haven't had, and we kind of go overboard with it. Materialism can creep in really quickly, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, you think about how a lot of times preachers will teach lessons on how during the bad times, that's usually when people will turn to the Lord, and in the good times, worldly people kind of are kind of do the same thing, even if it's not from a Christian or a real Christian standpoint. Even if they're not a Christian, most people want to turn to God if they believe in Him at a bad time, but then whenever they're in a good time, they're not going to think about Him at all.
Right.
So whenever you're with them in a good time, He's not on their radar, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And we as Christians, I don't know about you, but I've found it for me that when things are going well, I don't really think about how much I need God at any particular moment, right? We start thinking, I got it made. Things are going really well, can kind of coast for a little while, and that's a dangerous place to be. So we've heard the saying that if you're not growing, you're dying. That's an example of that, because we don't coast. We end up going downhill. Yeah. Nebuchadnezzar? All right. What about it? Oh, right. When he was pridefully exclaiming how great his kingdom was, and all of a sudden he's eating grass for 7 times, whatever that means. But yeah, perfect example of that. And so Moses is smart enough, of course the Holy Spirit is here, is smart enough to say, when the times get good for you, don't forget who gave them those things to you. And it's really easy to do. How can we, all right, so let's think about this financially. Although I realize that there's a whole lot more to it than that. But financially speaking, things go well in your life, and I know that people are really struggling right now. When things are going well, what is it that you can do with your finances or your material things to make sure you keep the right focus? Okay, so you need to be generous with what you have, and maybe create a plan for, what am I going to use this for? If we're think about it, if we're happy and content with X amount of money coming in, we're content, we're making it by, and all of a sudden we get a big raise at work. Well, all of a sudden X isn't enough anymore, and we have X plus Y. That's our new standard of living. So as our income increases, our standard of living increases with it. And here's a couple of questions. I saw a hand before I say this. Somebody have a hand? Oh, yeah.
We have to remember that everything with God is really God.
Mm-hmm.
How we use His money is.
Yes, everything is God's, and He expects us to use it in a way that's appropriate, in accordance with His will, certainly. If you continuously turn away from God when you have an increase in material possessions, if you continually turn away from God, and then when you lose all your possessions, you start coming back to God and start realizing, well, I really need Him in my life. And considering those two extremes, and you know that God wants you to be active in understanding who He is and depending upon Him, does it make sense that He may not let you have a lot of extra income and finances if you're going to just walk away from Him if He gives it to you? Or maybe even the opposite. Some people are only happy in life when they're miserable. They only find joy when things are going wrong, as strange as that might sound. So they will self-destruct, they do all kinds of things to make things back to a base level of misery. Well, if God thinks, or if God knows that the only way He can keep you faithful is to make you poor the rest of your life, would He be willing to do that? Of course He would. Now, please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying if you just serve God when the good times are good that you'll be rich. That's not my point. But the things that we're looking for are what we'll find, and God knows how to work with that. Think about that then with blessings that we have. What is a good life outside of the finances and material things? What would you say is a good life? Yes, you have family, friends, you have a rich relationship with a lot of people, or the right number of people, depending on your personality, right?
Well, I remember when I first got married that, we didn't have all this. We didn't even have television in those days. And I was just thinking how amazed I was that we went to this one couple's house and they had 2 children, we had 2 children. And she would open up one can of string beans that went along with the meal, and there was always some left. And how close our relationships were then.
Mm-hmm.
They were really close friends. I think a lot of this, the internet and all this has caused a lot of things going wrong with the young people. They don't need to go, they feel they don't need to go to church.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Yeah. Yeah, it's not just younger either. I've run into plenty of people that think I can just stay home and never go to church again. It's good old internet, right? Well, yeah. So if things are going well in life and you're having friendships and good relationships, then if sometimes God has to get your attention, how is it that kind of world of good relationships and stuff can draw us away from God? In what ways would we leave God? Okay, we get complacent and drift. She said we get complacent and we drift. So if you think about it, one of the dangers that we have is that not only can we get complacent, but we might be tempted to start compromising in order to maintain good or more friendships and relationships. If we think the most important thing in life is to have good, close family and friends, which is a treasure, then we can err easily by giving in to certain ideas and attitudes that we shouldn't give into. And we can be tempted to do that because it's so important to us that we maintain this fellowship and unity with these friends and family, because now we feel like we're filled, and I haven't ever had friends in my life, and it can go really bad. So, yeah, Paul?
That points out the importance of the family.
Right. Yeah. Yes, and that's why we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful with our acquaintances, right? And of course, and we had this discussion Sunday, and I think we're trying to. That balance is difficult. We've got to have friends outside the church. I mean, we've got to, but we can't have our close friends outside the church if we're going to be smart, because it's a dangerous situation. So we need to recognize, it's kind of like going out into the wilderness. If you're around here and you go out in the wilderness, what's the worst thing you'll see? You might see a rattlesnake. It'll give you plenty of warning, right? Maybe. Or a copperhead. Think about if you go down to Africa and you decide, I'm going to go wander around for a day or two. You may be eaten, right? And that's spiritually what we do when we go outside the fold of God. We need to be ready for what we're going to find there, because there's no telling what we'll see, and there's no telling what kind of influences that we'll find. So we have to be, as wise as serpents, is what Jesus said. So we have to be smart in the way we handle people. But I was hearing an illustration. This is actually from, I think Jordan Peterson was saying this one time. He said that people who are naive will look at someone and say, I'm going to open up my heart and be really open with these people. He said they're naive because they haven't had anything happen to them yet. But a strong person, after they are naive, the strong person will still say, I'm going to open up to these people even though I know they're full of trouble and I may have problems. That's strength. But we tend to think I'm strong by never opening up to anyone and keeping everything locked under lock and key around other people who are not exactly like me or not close to who I am. And so we find ourselves in that way, and congregations do that too. Unintentionally, we start realizing that everyone in the congregation is kind of the same. And when that situation is occurring, that's a symptom of a problem of not getting out into the community and interacting with people and trying to make an impact in their lives. Yeah, Paul?
I think you bring up the importance of how you treat your fellow Christians when they're talking to you. It's been many, many years that I will not say anything negative about our lives and the problems we had, because it would be used against us at a future time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that either. I'm not saying that exists here, but that's something that's happening in many, many churches.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So we have to be able to create an environment in which we can express ourselves in a loving way, even if it's not a positive thing, right? So that we can have support and we can have interaction and that kind of stuff. We have to have that kind of stuff. There's just no way around it. And so, yeah, we see that in the church too. And so it's all under lock and key, right? We've heard the term, he keeps it close to the vest, right? That's the way we are. And it's difficult to get over that. So I've tried to talk about things that have gone on in my life and bring them up, and without, I don't think it should be constantly talked about. But at the same time, we all have to share. We have to be open and willing to put ourselves out there and let people see this is who we are. And, we got scabs and flaws. We all know that about each other, but we're still afraid to talk about it. So, but anyway, when we get out in the community, we need to be the same kind of transparency, let people close so that you can bring them to God. Yeah. Yeah, there is some opening up there. Like I said, a lot of that, of course, is we're praying for each other and other people, which is good too. But we do have that, and there's a lot of camaraderie and openness. I think we can be open with each other. That's right. I feel comfortable there anyway. So in doing that, though, we have to recognize that there are people who are evil in the world that can harm us, and there are people who are evil in the world that don't even realize they're evil, that can still harm us. And we don't want to find ourselves being drawn away from God because of the way they treat us or the way we interact with them, even when things are going well. Okay, so Deuteronomy chapter 4, we have the, I know we're jumping around, but these were put in the best order to emphasize the most. In chapter 4, Moses warns against idolatry. How does our choice of companions affect the pursuit of God? I know we're kind of already talking about that, aren't we? Is there a difference between just living your life and having it affect your pursuit of God? Does it matter whether you're in the church or outside the church as far as having people who will support or pour water on your desires to do good? No, it's going to happen everywhere. So we have to understand this and recognize that when we're pursuing God, there are always going to be roadblocks. There's always going to be hiccups, and there's difficulties that come up. And so we have to be careful in the companions that we have. We don't want to for example, if you're out in the community and people are supportive of you going to church and things, that's one thing. But if you also are running into people over and over and over who think you're stupid for being a Christian, you probably don't want to spend as much time with them, right? I mean, it just makes sense. So are there any thoughts about this, about related to idolatry, though? What is idolatry in our modern sense? Things can be, yeah. Anything we put above God can be considered a form of idolatry. Yeah. The television, the phone. How do we know if those things are being put above God? Do without them? Well, now what I mean is anyone knows that you can use a television and your phone and still serve God and worship Him and keep Him first. But how do you know when that gets out of hand? It's too much. Sorry? When the Super Bowl comes on. How much time are you spending on that versus studying God's Word? Okay, so we kind of have some kind of a ratio, right? I don't know anybody that studies 12 hours a day, but I know of people that watch television 12 hours a day. Makes you wonder. So does it have to be a 1-to-1 ratio? I don't think it does, but we have to make judgments based on what it does as far as our heart is concerned, right?
Especially whenever it comes to our phones and social media, especially if you can tell which one is affecting you more. Like you're saying, like you're not going to study your Bible for 12 hours a day, maybe you're 12 hours a day, but you can notice which one is affecting you more, which one is put more of an impact on your.
Sure. So if one starts affecting you more than the other, you probably need to back off if it's not the Word, right? All right, that's a good way to know. These things are not easy to answer because we have a lot of different things going on in our lives, and we can't just say there's 2 things in my life that are important. There are lots of things in our lives that are important, but we don't want to put too much importance on anything. Yes.
We don't want to try and legislate for somebody that we don't know what their circumstances are. I mean, some people say you can't watch a different type of program on television. Some things are evil and bad, and they shouldn't. But be careful how you try to legislate how other people are living their lives.
Yeah, I agree. Because even, you probably open a can of worms with that one, but even when we all have to recognize that we have to figure out where those lines are drawn. And we have to do that in accordance to the best of our ability of what we can tolerate or not. And we can take the stance that I will never tolerate hearing or seeing any evil in this world. That's great. I mean, go ahead. I'm all for it. But go ahead and tell me how that works. Because you can't go anywhere without seeing something. It's going to be there. I'm not advocating that we ought to just, forget that. I won't have standards. That's not my point. But you're right. We have to be careful. And I've known people that judged other people because of something they watched on television. Like, yeah, but you don't know the circumstances. You don't know they had a filter block or they had all kinds of things, right? There's all kinds of ways that you can do things today that will help improve things.
Super Bowl. You know, I know the congregation can change their schedule.
Yeah, I think it can show a priority. I think it can. I think people argue on the other side, and they have some legitimate things they can say, but it's not convincing to me at all, to the point where we can say, okay, fine, we'll just change everything because the majority of people are doing this. But at the same time, there is precedent even for changing things and not doing the same thing every week or as a pattern. It doesn't. So there is time for that, but I agree with you. I think we can show that pretty easily. But we also have interesting things come up. Like, I've got a friend in the hospital. I've got a brother in the hospital. I've got a wife in the hospital. Everything's great. She's fine. And of course, I'm just speaking facetiously. She's right here, obviously, but everything's great. She can be there just fine without me, but I think I'm gonna miss anyway. Well, how do we make the judgment? We have to decide that for ourselves. It'd be really hard for any one of us to sit down and say, now listen, you could have been there, right? But at the same time, we have to ask the question, is it possible that we could have been there and we just decided we had something more important? What's so pressing that you have to be there by her side at every moment that she's there? You don't. Do you ever go to the bathroom? She's not with you? I mean, we understand that's how it works. So there are a lot of things that come up that we got to make some tough decisions about, and they can be difficult decisions. So we need to be gracious with one another, but we also need to make the decisions in appropriate ways. And in my opinion, the best way to do that is to say, okay, what's most important in this situation? And then go from there. It may be that you're in an emergency situation and you don't need to be away. And who can judge that? I can't, but I think that God can. So we need to be careful, make good, proper judgments, right? Any other thoughts? Yeah, that's a question we ask a lot. One of the tests that we have when we're sick, and we do this a lot, is, as often as we're sick. If it's on a Sunday, we ask the question, if we were going to go out with friends to a restaurant right now, would I go? And if I say yes, that means I'm going to church. Because, if I would do one thing, why wouldn't I do the other? So there are ways that we can ask questions like that, right, to help us do that. What's more important to me? And it's not always easy to see. And sometimes we may, I realize we can lie to ourselves pretty easily with that, but of course not. I wouldn't go at all. I'm too sick. You also have to ask the question, is it worth it if, other people are going to get sick, that kind of stuff. Yeah, Paul?
I think another part of that is the value of going to church. Being with people and sharing the experience, sharing what you're going through. This congregation does an extremely good job of that. Not everyone does.
Yeah, that's true. And as far as the camaraderie and the relationship, and I think it's improving even over time. That's a good thing. Yeah.
The frustrating thing that I've seen over the years is at the holidays, if families coming in, they'll stay home from worship. But to me, with my family, if my family's coming in, they understand if I'm there on a Sunday, Carla's going to be in worship. So if I want to be there, I'll be in worship with her.
Oh yeah, it's so much better to have family and worship with you. Yeah. So that's kind of gotten me too. A few times I've heard that. Well, I'm trying to convert my family, so I need to spend more time with them and not go to church with them when they're here. If you want to convert your family, show them what a Christian is like, and let them make the decision whether they're going to come or not. Just because they don't go doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. They can sit home and watch television, and it's just 2 hours, or an hour, however you want to look at it. Yeah, that's good. So there are lots of ways that we can practically help ourselves and make sure that we're not, going the wrong directions here. All right, next question. Chapter 21, what can we learn from the laws concerning rebellious children about the importance of choosing companions. What was the law of rebellious children, the rebellious son? Starting in verse 18. They'd take them out and stone them. Yeah. Do you suppose that was, they one day they had a bad day and mom told them to do something, they said no, and so they just took them out and stoned them? That's true. But if they had, it wouldn't have been a stoning situation. We're talking about someone who has a heart of rebellion. That's the idea. Nothing you can do about it. Yeah, that's right. And so obviously we're not going to do the death penalty nowadays, but when this was to help, what good did it do in the community of the Israelites for this kind of thing to happen, for them to actually kill people over this? Set the example of this is what you don't do, yeah. Let them know so there's a zero tolerance for rebellion. When you kill all the rebellious people, who's left? The people who are not rebellious. And that's exactly what God wanted. He wanted the people there. So as far as setting up a structure for a physical kingdom, which is what he was establishing there. Remember, this is a spiritual and physical kingdom. The physical kingdom part, well, that's pretty excessive. In our day and time, we'd say, well, that's too excessive. But it was not considered too excessive back then. In fact, in many ways, he gave laws that lightened the excessiveness to a great degree. But do you think this has anything to do with raising children and keeping them from being rebellious? How do we determine whether or not, I know most of us, our kids are already grown. I think anybody in here has kids that right now they're raising. How do you determine whether or not somebody's friend is too far gone or too excessive or too rebellious to let your kid around them? Sorry? You start noticing how they behave when they come home from visiting them. That's an indicator, right? I think parents, especially today, are very, very cautious. I think sometimes we're overly cautious, honestly, but there is room for a lot of caution. And we had strict rules about when our kids were growing up. You don't go over to someone's house unless we know who they are. If we don't know them, you're not going. So you can come over here, they can come to our house, but you're not going to their house. And we said, well, they're saying the same thing. Well, that's tough then, right? So maybe we can have a meet-up with the parents or something. But it's really important to know who our children are around. All right, so where does social media fit into that? I'll tell you what, there's more influence by people they don't know than people that they do know nowadays. We're talking about social media. It's been a problem for decades. It's not just a new thing. But there are people who are influenced more by YouTube and Twitter and all kinds of other things I'm not sure about, that the influence there is greater than even the parents and greater than many, even in the classmates even. That's a severe problem. And, some people have said, well, just we're not going to have it at all in our family. That's a legitimate idea, but we have to also figure out a way to train kids how to face things and do it in the best way. And I don't know how to do that. But I do know that if you are looking out for and trying to see how your kids are being influenced, things you start asking about are, for example, you hear when they come home and they have new ways of saying things, or they dress differently, or that doesn't mean that it's a negative influence, but it means it's an influence. And so you need to try to figure out the best that you can, where is that influence coming from, what kind of influence is it going to be, and that kind of stuff. So anyway, any thoughts on that?
More dangerous now than several, say a decade ago because of the drugs and everything that's involved, that
There is the potential of influence today is greater than it's ever been. That's hands down. Now, that doesn't mean that kids are running into it, but it is a lot more prevalent. It's a lot easier to access now than it has ever been. And with some exceptions, the 90s was a pretty rough time with being online. I mean, that was pretty bad. And it's actually cleaned up a lot since then. It's a lot more restrictive as far as like pornography websites and things like that, although it's still a serious problem. Yeah, Paul?
I've talked to some younger people, teenagers, and as they get toward older teenagers, and they wish their parents had sat down and actually had decent conversations with them about the problems. We get embarrassed by things and we gloss it over, and we have a
Yeah.
five-minute talk about sexual relationships, and we think that we've covered everything. They all say that's not enough.
Yeah, that's true.
More of an understanding of what life is about.
We need to, yeah, conversations and helping people. Sooner or later, you can't treat a 13-year-old like an adult, but you start treating them more and more like an adult and having these kinds of conversations and openness and talking about here are problems, here are things, up to the point of what they can handle, right? But we still need to have more of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I think it's important to that your kids can come to you and feel like they can trust you and that they also, just that you can trust them, but they also feel like they can trust you. So they do feel like they can come to you whenever they feel like they're being influenced in somewhere, or they have questions instead of shutting it down immediately
Yeah.
or immediately getting on to them, or like actually explain it and just make them feel like they can trust you.
Right. So you develop a relationship of, I'm going to listen to what you have to say. And yeah. So in fairness, we need to be more open to younger people. And at the same time, we also know that when you're raising teens, that it doesn't matter what you do, it's wrong. And you're always the one who they can never trust you because you're the evil parent, right? And there's a lot of that. Sometimes that's because we have been doing our job, right? We have to put restrictions. But when we start allowing them to do more and more, we have to kind of help govern that. And anyway, I'm speaking from experience on raising two, but
We have to remember there's nothing new under the sun. Okay, it's bad now, but what was going on in the sixties? I mean,
there's always opportunity for evil. There's always been, and it's just a matter now of where it is and how we can access it. It was a lot harder to find trouble, perhaps, in earlier times, when it's not a fingertip away.
Every decade, every generation, everything has different things that are more quote unquote popular at the time.
Yeah.
Like I think there's more sin that's more popular and more prominent, but it never really goes away.
No, it never goes. It's always there. Yeah. Yes, that's right. And in some ways it is getting worse, but in some ways it's not. In fact, in some ways it may be improving. There's just so many facets. Yeah. We're not aware. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and they start doing things differently than we did. So that is part of that. Yeah, Paul?
When you look at the Israelites, look out, that third generation, that's the following generation.
Oh, yeah, because there's the generation trying their best, and then it kind of goes downhill from there. That's true, but we also need to be really careful. And I've seen this in the church, but not as much as I've seen it in other places, where the older generations will these kids nowadays, just almost like they're throwaway. They're like they're useless. Oh, there's no hope for these kids, and I don't think we ought to be that way. There's a lectureship that several years ago I think they still have it, but they had a reputation of their whole lectureship was, let's get together and talk about how bad the new generation is. And that's pretty much all they did. I mean, a whole week of it. Every lesson was how bad Gen Z or Gen whatever it is now is, right? And that's not productive. It doesn't help anyone. And so we don't want to be in attack mode. We need to be understanding. We need to think about, if we were at their age and their influences and their things that they're facing right now, would we be much different? Probably not. And so we have to help. I think we can help where they are, and that just means we're going to have more and more communication. Anyway, generational things are really interesting. Yeah.
I think one of the problems we have in the church that we lose so many of our young people is that we don't treat them like Christians. We treat them as young people who don't know anything and can't do it. They can do a tremendous amount.
Yeah, I agree.
And help them in things that are going on within the church. Helping other people. They can be very, very active.
Yeah. That's right. So that's a challenge, is trying to figure out, okay, how can we get them involved and make them feel like the faith is theirs, that they can grow, right? That is a challenge, yeah.
That's a quick analogy that I heard one time in whenever I was a young teenager, one of the women that taught our classes on orientation, she told us one time that God doesn't view sin as like we can look at tall buildings and we just see one shorter one tall or whatever, but God just sees them like at the top, like He's not seeing these sins on different levels. He's just seeing everything
From the top down.
So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
I feel like we're talking about different generations had more popular different sins, and so it's like, oh well, this wasn't as bad, but now this in this day and age is awful. But God doesn't see it as that. God just sees it all.
Yeah, there is truth in that as far as what will keep you out of heaven. Now, He's always said that there are somewhat of degree of things. Some things are worse than others. For example, you can look in Romans chapter 1. There's a list of things that he talks about. When society gets to a certain point, this is pretty much where the society begins to end. And that relates to the worship of false gods and homosexuality being prominent and prevalent. Now, that doesn't mean that they're hopeless or that they're lost and can't be saved, but some sins have more of an impact on society than others. If you tell a small lie, it's sin. You can be lost for that, but that's a lot different than murdering someone based on the impact that it has, right? So the influence of that is much greater. And so we can see it from two different views. But I agree with you. We can't just look around and say, yeah, they did so many things so much worse than we did. So that wouldn't work. All right. Let's see. Well, we got, I think, like another minute. Anybody else have a comment?
The whole thing to me is you just have to keep flowing closer to God.
Yeah.
You do that.
If God is our number one pursuit, it's not that we won't have any problems, but we're gonna find the solutions, and He has to be number one. And we're all gonna make mistakes. We're all gonna do things we look back on and go, what did I do that for? But if we'll keep in mind, and we'll make mistakes regarding our friends too. We'll choose the wrong friendships, or we'll let somebody influence us a little bit more than they should, that kind of stuff. It's gonna happen. We just need to face it. So, all right. Well, we'll go ahead and call it then. Thank you very much for your good comments. Okay, before the, let me put this on. Oh, we're gonna have, here's some announcements. Garrett and Katie are moving into their new home the 30th, and they need your help. If you're able to help, please see Garrett for details. We might want to put a text message out to our young group about that, but any of y'all can help, please do, let him know. Also, beginning the 30th, Saturday, we're starting a monthly young marrieds class taught by Casey and Marie Norris, and that class will meet in the annex at 6 p.m. You can bring your own meal or eat before class. The book that they're going to be going through right now is called The 5 Love Languages. If you need a copy of it or have any other questions, please see either Casey or Marie. There is a church lawn maintenance sign-up sheet in the back. Please sign up for a week or 2 or 3. If you have any questions, see Chuck. Really, it's not that difficult to do, and we have everything you need here to do it. So all you need to do is show up, and I'll open the thing for you. Let's see here. Friday the 29th is our 5th Friday family game night. We'll be gone. So please come to that. That's once a quarter, and it's for everyone. Bring a friend, bring snacks, bring whatever you want to do. We'll have more details, I guess, next week. It's the 29th, so it's the last Friday of the month. So a week from Friday, I think. It's not this Friday, it's the next one. And that's so we're going to just play games and all kinds of fun stuff. So do what? Oh, bring finger foods. Yeah. If you want to eat it, bring it. That'll work. The Digging Deeper Ladies Bible class or Bible study will be Monday, the 25th at 6:30. Also, ladies, if you'd like to participate in Secret Sisters, pick up the information packet in the foyer. The questionnaire is due Sunday, April 7th. Please get it to Holly Lipsey. We also have a need for, one of our members has structural repair on the house. The elders are requesting our church to help in that need. Contributions should be identified and given to Stephen Bill. And I think that's all the announcements we have. I did hear, I don't know the details. We're going to add these to the list, but there was this afternoon, let me just see the text message. Hold on, before I go saying things wrong. There was a young girl who was in Wolf City. She was a 7th grade girl, was hit by a Jeep and dragged for a while. And so the town is just in turmoil over that right now. So if you could keep them in your prayers, that would be good, along with the other long list of prayers that we have. I'll turn it over to James.